All right, I think that we can quickly start this thing, and it's 2 minutes past 10, and I welcome everyone. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening, depending on where you are. And I welcome you to the Coffee with Quha webinar. Today we are talking about assistive technology as a service, and my name is Petri Latvarasku. I'm responsible for Quha marketing activities here at Quha. At Quha, we are basically making assistive devices for computers. So our main products are Quha Zono and Quha Zono 2 head mice. And today we have Fiona Still from Zytec here. So maybe Fiona, you could introduce yourself and perhaps tell a little bit about what your company Zytec is doing.
Thanks, Petri. Zytec's a company that sells and supports a selection of electronic assistive technology, but it's a company that does more than just that. It's about how to select the things we sell, how to set them up, and how to get the best use out of them. And it's a company that was set up by Tracy Bode, speech pathologist, who established Zytec about 13 years ago. And Tracy's philosophy is to assist people with disability to find the right technology for them to achieve their goals. It's a company that works across the whole of Australia. I joined Zytec in July last year, and my background is in occupational therapy, and Tracy and I worked together when we were very young speech pathologists and occupational therapists back in the early 90s, when electronic assistive technology was really in its infancy. And in the past 30 years, I've worked in a variety of disability-related roles that largely have involved the use of and prescription of assistive technology. And like Tracy, I come from that real ethos of how can we support people to choose and use and implement into their lives assistive technology that allows them their independence, to access education, work, the community, and to have a quality of life, a high quality of life. So that's sort of my background. We also have this wonderful team of people who support the business, and in particular in that customer facing, we have a range of assistive technology consultants that have speech pathology, biomedical science, occupational therapy and education backgrounds who really guide and support the assistive technology users, but also the support team, their clinicians, their families, support staff, to best select, use and set up assistive tech.
Okay, and thank you for the introduction, and during the presentation, for everyone who is now listening, feel free to send us an email to webinar@quha.com, or you can also just shoot your questions. So basically we have Teams meeting here, so you can just interrupt us and ask your question, and that way we can do this in a little bit interactively, but you are of course free to just listen if you like to do so. So today's subject is really something interesting. So assistive technology as a service. So I know that Zytec is doing something that you are kind of renting or hiring devices, and maybe you could tell what kind of types of acquiring assistive devices Zytec provides. So maybe you can tell a little bit about this, how this works.
So our company was set up and with a focus on speech generating devices, and has really grown, and has grown also as changes have been in Australia with the way technology and assistive technology is funded. So we have a range of dedicated speech generating devices, and also we sell bundles of mainstream that are based around mainstream Microsoft and Apple tablets, but they're bundled with specialised software, specialised access, casing, all those sorts of things. And then we have a range of ways that people might operate and access that equipment. So eye gaze technologies, alternative mouse options, Quha being a big one of those, switches, key guards, anything that's going to assist someone to better access and use that technology. and then also related to those products, environmental control or home automation, access to those products. What's happened in Australia over the last 10 years has that there's been a major change in funding, and where funding had for a lot of technology come around traditional augmentative and alternative communication options for people, funding's been expanded to look at what does someone need due to their disability that might be different from the things that other people might need. And this funding has been, the scope of funding's broadened. So someone who wants to use a computer and because of their disability needs an alternative mouse might get funding for that, where previously it would have been that they needed, that they would have been considered for funding if they had a difficulty with communication, but not just with perhaps the access to the computer. So our services have changed in line with, and the equipment that we sell and support has changed in line with the changes of funding, but then also the ways that we provide that equipment has changed. So people buy equipment for us, they hire equipment for trial purposes to look at, what might be best for them. Is something going to work? Is it going to suit their specific needs? Or there is also a little bit of a, not long-term, but longer-term 12-week rental options as well for people.
So what exactly is the difference now here between, for example, renting and hiring, and then ultimately when you are kind of maybe purchasing it? So what's the big difference here?
I'm going to answer that by stepping back for a minute. In terms of what we try and do is look for at an individual and looking at, it's a program or framework that we use called the READY program, which really looks at that when someone comes to us, that they come and we're on a journey with them, where we're supporting them, we're supporting their team to look at what they want to do, whether we've got equipment that might, and the technology that might help them, provide them with options. And this is where our purchase, trial, rental program comes in to evaluate. So really be able to try those pieces of equipment in place. So is this going to suit my needs? Does it have the features that I need? Is it going to allow me to do what I want it to do? But also, where am I going to use it? Is it going to work in the work environment? I might live in a residential setting where I have support, and is there support available to people who know how to connect it, how to charge it, how to keep it operational for me? Those sorts of things that until you have a piece of equipment in place, you might not be able to answer those questions. And I'll talk about it a bit later on. There is also drivers from the funder to actually be able to have evidence that the equipment is going to work for someone. So in amongst all of that, we have a range of options where people might have equipment for anything from 1 to 4 weeks for trial, and what we call that process is a guided evaluation, and we work very much in partnership with the person using the equipment and their team. And it's generally a clinical guided evaluation will work with that person's speech pathologist or occupational therapist, so that we're letting out equipment for trial that is best suited to the person, that we've got support from our team, from our AT consultants in the preparation for that trial, in setting that piece of equipment up when it arrives for that person to trial. And we do that across Australia, and we do it remotely. So we're very good with video consultation, team viewer setups, those sorts of things, in being able to set that piece of equipment up so it's ready for someone to go. They might not know all the background of how things are and how we might support someone if they've purchased equipment, but we can get that equipment ready for someone so that a trial can allow them to answer the questions that they might want to know. What support's needed? Is it going to allow me to do what I want to do? Is it easy to use? Am I going to compare? It might be the use of comparing a head mouse like Quha with eye gaze, or looking at when I might use one and when I might use another, and allowing those comparisons and trials to happen. And those things are usually short term. The trial may have been the first contact that someone has with our services to trial a piece of equipment. Someone may also have done an evaluation. So we do evaluations, both face-to-face or remote evaluations, where we might send out a couple of pieces of equipment to someone and work with them either face-to-face or remotely with a 2-hour assessment sort of a process to actually really refine what are the things that are important in a system for that person. And then there are longer sort of 12-week rental options, and that might be for someone who needs might be changing. It might be a child, for instance, whose needs are changing and they might be moving through technology and the type of technology, but if they don't start at the right place, there might not be that progression. Or it might be someone who doesn't have the money to purchase outright at that time and they want to have a more extended trial. Or it might be someone who is at the end of life and is having trouble with communication and they need equipment, but they need it quickly, but they don't need it for the long term, just in that palliative phase of their life, that it's really important that they have access to that equipment.
Yeah, sounds really interesting, because in this case, the customer who is trialing this, they really have the time to get acquainted to the device, so then afterwards they really know that this device is really suitable for me. So how long have you been doing this in general, so giving this possibility of getting acquainted and trialing and maybe hiring devices for a period of time? So how long has Zytec been in this business?
So Zytec's been in business for 13 years, and trial has always been a part of our business, but it's really been in the last 10 years when our funding changed in Australia. We used to have funding that was very much state-based. So we've got different states and territories, and they all had their own funding that was based in those regions. And then 10 years ago, and it was a slow rollout of a national scheme where the rules were the same. So it didn't matter whether I lived in a outback community in far north Queensland or I lived in Melbourne in a big city. My access to funds and services should be equal. And it also changed the scope of funding. So, but one of the things that came with that introduction of the NDIS was really looking at some more rules around how you got equipment and what evidence you might need to provide that that equipment was going to be the best for you. So if a piece of equipment costs more than $5,000 Australian, which is about 3,200 euro, 3,600 US dollars, there needs to be an assistive technology report written by a clinician. So in our scope of work, generally a speech pathologist or occupational therapist. They have to have completed assessments, trial of equipment and write a support recommending things. So that trial process has become really integral to the supply of equipment. And previously in the state-based funded systems, the state systems had equipment for trial or funded some of those things directly. Now that's a part of the service of an assistive technology service needs to have equipment available for people to trial. But the other thing that's expanded, which I touched on earlier, was also that the scope of what equipment might be funded. So it can be a speech generating device and system for someone and the access to it, or it might be that someone wants to do gaming on their iPad and a head mouse will allow them to do that. And while the scheme might not fund the iPad and the games, but they would fund the Quha as an example, because it's something that relates to that, the need relates to that person's disability. I think the other thing that's been really key for us in providing this over this time is really the importance of our AT team and their role in helping people match, you look at people's needs and matching that to the equipment, but then also getting the equipment right is important, but also getting that set up and support to make sure that the the trial is successful. And success might be that you try something and this is the best piece of equipment, or the trial is successful in ruling out things or refining what might be the features of a device for someone.
Yeah. So is it so that all the devices that you are selling or hiring, does it always go through the same process? So I mean, what I'm trying to get at is that, do you always first hire a device, or are there people who just directly purchase it immediately, or how does it work?
Generally, someone will have had some contact with us and they might have gone through an assessment and trialled an evaluation and go on to purchase a device. They might have an assessment, then a trial, and then purchase, or they might, from that initial contact with us, they might go straight to trial. So if it's very clear, so the Assistive technology team consultants will have a look at and discuss with someone. It might be very clear on the features that someone needs, and then they might go directly through to trial.
Right, and you are providing this option for trialing and hiring for all the products that you are selling. Is this so?
Not everything, most things. So we don't, our Apple-based tablet systems, we don't. And then there are some access pieces of equipment, smaller access equipment that we don't have for trial, but we do have for purchase or return. So people can trial it at home for a week or two, and if it's not suitable, they can return that to us. But it's usually more complex pieces of equipment, more expensive pieces of equipment.
And if a person rents a device, then how does it work in terms of service and repair? So let's say that something is not working. So what happens when you are inside or in the middle of the rental period?
So when we send out things, we will set them up and make sure that they're working. I think my colleague Emma is online. If it's not working, it becomes her issue. In general, that we don't have many things that will go wrong. There are lots of things that we can do remotely, whether it's by team viewer and setup, and drilling down to whether there is a problem with the equipment or it's a knowledge of how the equipment works. So that said, that there's a lot of support that we provide during the trial process. So pre-trial, what do you need? What do people need to get ready? And it might be simple as the Wi-Fi passwords, or if they want to connect into their email account, that they know their passwords. So if they're trialing a piece of communication equipment that they've thought about, and the software or the AAC package that they'll use and what vocabulary set they might be choosing, so that there's work done to prepare for it. We do a setup appointment where we really work with that person's team to make sure that getting the equipment out of the box, that they can get it working, and then we'll provide support throughout. If things are not working, then they'll be returned to us and then we'll set up a new trial. But, if it really providing that service and support during the trial to ensure that the breakdown of something not working is not due to the equipment not working. It's, if there's problems with understanding how the equipment might work or the functionality of it, we're available to provide support throughout that trial. And generally at the end of a trial, we really try and have a check-in call with people. Someone said, oh, look, it's really great, and I thought I wanted to use it, but it doesn't do, Quha as an actor. Really want to use it, and it's been great on my computer, but I really need an option for my iPad. And, sort of like, well, yeah, you've got an option. It's the Quha, and here's a cable, and here's how it might work. So, that brings to another point about that process, is making sure that people have the full suite of things to try. So we do have Zono 2 for hire, and we send that out with connections so that people could use it with Android, Microsoft-based and Apple-based products. There's an assessment kit, so the different wearable options people can try and contrast and really be able to make an informed decision for purchase as well.
Yeah. I was looking at Zytex, or your web pages, and I noticed there was something interesting, and it was called buy to own after 12-week hire. So can you explain what that means in concrete terms?
It's for things that generally it's access equipment that the cost of the 12-week hire nearly equates to an outright purchase. So it's not something we do generally for our speech and devices or bundles, but if there is, it's an option that if someone's tried something for 12 weeks and they want to continue to do it, there's an option to buy that piece of equipment out.
Okay. And typically when we are in Australia, so do you know who, obviously you know, but who is financing assistive technology in Australia? So I know that in many countries it goes so that there are kind of financial, let's say insurance companies, and there is government, there are private organizations who are funding, then people are in some cases also financing themselves. But how does this work in Australia, and what is the most popular way of financing assistive devices?
So one of my OT colleagues did a research a couple of years ago on the fragmented funding of assistive technology in Australia, and there's lots of state-based national government and non-government services, but this National Disability Insurance Scheme that I mentioned earlier is the main way. It's been in place and is fully rolled out in Australia, all across Australia now, over the last 10 years. And it is a national way of funding both supports to people. So if people need assistance, with daily living, skills, that also funds capital, and that's where assistive technology fits in. They fund home modifications, assistive technology, and then they also fund supports for capacity building. So being able to build people's independence and quality of life, and that's where therapy services are generally funded. So the combination of that support worker capital and capacity building fits into the assistive technology. I think the importance there is that they're not funding just only the equipment, because that's important, but also what's important is having the support to implement it and to ensure that people know how to use it, how to program it,
Exactly.
somewhere to go when things go wrong. So that is the main way, and it's a funding scheme that you have to be under 65 at the time you first enter that scheme. So, it funds children right through, but if you acquire your disability after the age of 65, that scheme is not open to you. If you are in that scheme before 65, it can continue throughout your lifetime. There are different but similar packages for people over 65. Not quite as easy to fund larger pieces of assistive technology. We have insurance schemes that are based around people who might have had injuries at work or transport related injuries that are separate. And then of course there's a range of funding, other private funding options as well. But the National Disability Insurance Scheme is the major funder of equipment.
Yeah. And I gathered from all this that, for example, in there the financer is very supportive of these hiring and rental options, because I would imagine that it is also very useful for them to see that people are getting proper devices and they don't have to switch them afterwards.
It is very supportive. It part of its funding provides funds for people to pay for the hire and trial of equipment, because they want to be assured that when the purchase goes through, that the equipment is going to be suitable for that person. Yep. And it's that trial in place. And for some people, an assessment and a use of a piece of equipment, and it can be easy to tell perhaps in a couple of hours that yes, that's going to work. But for other people, they really need to be able to try that throughout their day, throughout the week, to look at those supports to actually really see if the equipment's going to do what it needs to do, the potential there. It's not going to answer all of someone's questions, but that in-home extended trial gives people more opportunities to actually find out. And we would all know that everybody embraces technology differently. So there's people who, are early adopters. They love to try things. They've had lots of technology experience. There is other people who might not be as familiar, older people who are not as familiar, or it's not as easy for them to grasp and use new technology. And everybody's different. So I think that trial process and the support throughout that trial process gives people the opportunity to see, can the environment, does the equipment do what the person needs it to do, number one, and is the environment able to support that? Technology is only good as remembering to charge it overnight to make sure the software's up to date, that connections are maintained, those sorts of things as well.
Yeah, and when we are thinking of these devices, so let's just say that the person would need a computer, some access methods, maybe some software, and you are combining all this. I understand that you are able to evaluate what is needed and you are able to provide this. Can this person, for example, rent the entire package containing, let's say, multiple parts?
So when we our Microsoft-based tablets and our dedicated communication devices are supplied with the AAC software on them. So either Grid 3 or on the Jabla products, people will be using MindExpress 5. And there's a range of other software on there as well. So if people are trialling eye gaze, for instance, there will be programs such as Look to Learn supplied on the equipment so that they can trial and really know to do that. So when we are hiring out equipment for trial, it really is a system. So all the cables that are needed, the software, our bundles that we sell of mainstream tablets, we sell as bundles so that they have protective cases on them, the straps, anything that the case that the system that people hire is a reflection of what they would purchase, so they can really see how that will work or not work for them in their home and or work school environment. If people are hiring eye gaze, for instance, they will have access to higher mounts, so tabletop clamp-on mounts or rolling mounts, so to allow them the best chance of success in really being able to mount and to position that eye gaze system in the best position. And as I said before, with things like the Quha Zono 2, there's the cables to connect it to a range of different devices. There's an assessment kit with all the wearables so people can trial and be able to choose between different options.
Yeah, and perhaps one final question here is that what are the factors that you have found important in equipment trials and rentals? So what are the most important things that you have noticed?
So I think that with the equipment is that it goes out, it's in working order, that there is that range of all of the components are there ready for trial. But the most important thing that we've found is this partnership that we build with the people, the AT user and their team, and that trial process that we describe as a guided evaluation, where we're working to support that person and their team to understand how the technology works, how it can be best tailored to meet the needs of that person, and to provide support throughout that trial. And that's really the most important in looking at do we have the technology that's going to help someone? We don't want to sell someone or get someone trialing something that's not going to help them. How can they prepare for that trial? And then during that trial, how can we help them set it up initially and then provide them with support during that trial period? And if someone tries a piece of equipment from us and then goes on to purchase, we also provide assistance with that implementation phase as well.
Okay, thank you. And perhaps this would be a good time to see if we have any questions. So maybe somebody from here could check if there are any email questions or questions, and you are able to also shoot questions to us directly here in Teams or Teams chat. So can somebody check if there are any questions at this point?
Yeah, hello, Stephen Klingner speaking from France. So, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, hello. I have one question. So, can you tell us a bit more how your model is working? So, I don't know if you have a price tag you can exchange, or if that's something which is too sensitive for you. I just try to understand. So, because when you start renting and giving products for a couple of weeks, so on our side we are trying to experiment that, but we are wondering how to manage that, because there is on one side investment in the equipment, and on the other side the return on that investment. So my question to you is, where is the right point, and how did you balance that into your model?
I think it is. I mean, I won't go right down to fine points on that, but certainly generally it is that balance in looking at what's the turnover of equipment. You know, you've got an equipment library, how do you maintain it? For us supporting, you know, Australia is a large country geographically, so even, you know, part of that trial process is the cost of actually getting equipment to and from people. So that courier supply chain is an important part of it. And we've also looked at our pricing in terms of what's going to allow us to maintain and add to, but also, you know, when we need to replace, you know, what's the and as that service is growing, you know, we get to know what the replacement sort of time is for equipment as well. But we've also looked in pricing things, in being able to price similar equipment that we have to hire in similar price ranges. So not answering directly, but if someone's going to choose between communication device A and B, we don't want them to trial B because it's $100 cheaper to trial than A. We want them to, you know, if they're both 10-inch screen devices, we want them to choose the one that's best suited to them. So that's the other factor, you know, in the higher price has to take into account the couriering, the maintaining and cost of initial purchase of equipment and the lifespan it's going to be, but then also that support for equipment when it's out in the field as well. So all of those elements have to come into the price. I think that we're, you know, and we do have some equipment that we have for complementary trials as well. Where we are in Australia with our National Disability Insurance Scheme, in the position where we're very lucky that they've seen the importance of trial, so that there is a funding route for the AT user to be able to find funding to help them to pay for that trial equipment as well.
Okay, so if I get it right, so it's a kind of a enabler for you for selling, and this is something you keep it as self-sustainable, that you can renew basically the product you have for trial and cover the cost of handling them. That's the way you go. Okay.
Well, it's all those elements: the handling, the cost of the product, but also the support for the product as well. You know.
Yeah, preparation, installation, support, and
and that support when people are trialing, so that they can ring someone back at SciTech, and, you know, if things are not going well, or that things are going well and we're ready to move to the next level of use of the equipment or whatever. That's really important in that process.
And maybe another question, if I got it right, the longest period of time you are providing devices is 6 weeks, correct? That's the way you go. You don't go beyond that.
Most trials are 2 to 4 weeks, but we can trial things up to 12 weeks. And then there are some occasions where if we've hired something out to someone who's at the end of life, we will extend that trial. We're not going to ask for that equipment back, you know, when someone's in a palliative stage. We'll just, extend that trial for as long as it's needed.
As long as it's needed. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stefan, for the excellent questions. So any other questions from anyone? Okay, hey, I don't think we have any questions. Feel free to send them, for example, to me later if something pops up, and I can connect to you to Fiona if it is a question that I cannot answer directly. So thank you, Fiona, for the excellent presentation or your insights on this interesting. It is a really interesting idea in my opinion, because I think that this system would also technically work here also in Finland where we are, but it is not being done at the moment. But I think that there would be nothing to really prevent this, and I think that in many ways it would work excellently here. And in terms of Quha Coffee with Quha webinars, so for this year, 2021, this was our last webinar, and then we will figure out new interesting webinars for 2022. So if you have any ideas of something that you would like to hear, send it to us and we'll consider whether this would be something that we could take up as a webinar. So, all right. Hey, thank you, everyone, and see you again in some place. We will see you in exhibitions eventually, I guess. All right. Thanks
Petri.
everyone. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.